Good morning, church. Happy Sabbath from Katie, Denise, and Todd. We hope that everybody's having a blessed day and you've had a blessed week. We're coming to you from your church, Jennings Lake, and we just want to share a little bit of something that Denise sent to me earlier last week. And it's going to be talking about Joshua chapters 3 and 4. The companion that will go along with this is Patriarchs and Prophets, chapter 44. So I want to encourage you to spend some time in the book of Joshua today. Also read Patriarchs and Prophets, chapter 44. Great, thrilling stories. Some of these stories in the Old Testament are so great to me because they're so action-packed. As many of you know, Joshua starts out, Moses has just died, right? And the children of Israel have a brand new leader. And Joshua, who in the past has been known as a great warrior, a great leader, fighter, is now God has put him in charge over the Israelites. And so as Joshua starts off, they send the spies out to look at the promised land. We know that Rahab, remember the story, she hides them and puts that scarlet cord out. And now in chapter 3 it starts off that they're on the cusp of going over and finally occupying the promised land that they've been wandering now for 40 years, because remember their fathers didn't have enough faith and strength and courage in God to go in and actually possess it. So now 40 years later, they're at the eve of going into the promised land. And so the great thing about this story that I love is it's happening in the springtime, just like we're in springtime now. We've got some uncertain paths that are here ahead of us, and the children of Israel find themselves in an uncertain path. They to get over into the promised land, they're going to have to cross over the Jordan River. And so as Joshua 3 starts off, it is so wonderful that God tells Joshua that I'm not going to tell you how this is going to happen. I'm just going to tell you that I want you to get the priests, I want you to get the ark, and I want you to go down in towards the Jordan, and I will reveal everything. And so Joshua 3 goes on and it tells us that Joshua gathers up all the children and explains to them that tomorrow when you see the priests go down to the river, you're to follow them and do as you are instructed. Now the Bible tells us that they were to keep a set distance away from the priest with the ark. This was done out of reverence, that God still wanted them to maintain that healthy respect from where his presence was. So you talk about social distancing, we're to keep 6 feet apart. They were to keep a half a mile distance, more than 3,000 feet between where the ark was and where they were. As they get closer, God says, Joshua, I'm going to do something today that is going to show the children of Israel that I have put you in power and that you're going to be just like Moses was to them. And that not only is this act that I'm going to do instill strength in our children of Israel, but it's going to show all the other people who don't believe in me that I am the one true God. You see, the people on the other side, they worship Baal, and they thought that Baal was the god of the water that would control things, and they would test things by the water, but God was going to show who the one true God is. And so as they march down, as they go down, God still hasn't shown what's going to happen, and then as they get ready to go, he reveals to Joshua, he says, tell the priests to go, and we want them to step into the water. Now at this point in time, if some people are thinking, well, maybe it was a shallow place. In the springtime, Bible historians tell us that the flood waters come in and the Jordan is so full and is so fastly moving that it comes upon the whole banks of each side. And so there was no way for them to safely get across where they were going to ford. And so God says, when the priest's feet get into the water, watch what happens. You see, God does something miraculous. Just like years ago as he parted the Red Sea for their fathers, when the priest's feet with the ark hit that water, God stops the northbound flow and shuts it off. And the water continuing south dries up to where now all those children get across on dry land. Can you imagine that? A second parting. As they're going across, before they start the cross, God tells Joshua, he says, I want you to get 12 guys representing 12 tribes, and I want them to go and I want them to get 12 stones out of that river Jordan, and I want them to carry to the other side. as they're going through, those 12 guys, Joshua calls them, they take those 12 stones to the opposite side where they just now crossed. Joshua then says, as soon as everything is done, before those priests leave, they're going to get 12 more stones, and they're going to stack those up in the middle of the Jordan River, showing where those priests were actually standing. And as soon as that was accomplished, and as soon as everybody's done, Joshua calls the priests over to the other side, and God then releases his hand, and the flood waters continue on down, just as if nothing ever happened. Now all the children of Israel are on the other side. They've made it to the promised land. What's facing them next is Jericho. And as they are there getting ready to make camp, God instructs Joshua. He says, I want you to stack those stones. I want you to put these stones up here on the dry ground. And also those stones have been stacked where the Jordan River is. And those stones are going to serve as a memorial in time to where when your children ask, what do these stones mean? You're going to tell them how your God, their God, our God, got them across safely, did what no one else could do, stopping that flow of water, getting everybody across safely on dry ground, and then releasing the waters once again. God knew that they would forget. God knew that Todd would forget. God knew that Todd would forget all the blessings, all the things that God has done for me in my life. He wanted to put those stones, he wanted those stones stacked, so that when they forgot, they could look back and say, oh man, my faith is weak, but look at what God did, and go and remember that. Denise shared something with me, as she often does, that made me think that maybe I need to be stacking some stones as reminders, as mileposts, as markers of all the promises God has kept, all the answered prayers God has done in my life, so that when we go through these unusual times like we're going now, and sometimes our faith might be shaking, we can look to those stacked stones and remember and say, oh, this is what God has already done for me many, many times. If you're like me, you would have stacked stones everywhere, showing how great God's goodness is. So I just want to encourage you today, Denise and I and Katie, as we bring you this message from Joshua, to read it. Encourage yourself, encourage your family and your loved ones, that when fear comes about, when Satan tries to get us to doubt, to forget how God has led in the past, remember this story in Joshua 3 and 4 that shows that God is still there. The same God that stopped that river is going to stop the rivers in our life. So when you're in doubt, when your faith needs bolstering up, take some time, stack stones. Have a happy Sabbath. We love you. Bye.